Okay, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all keeping well, and welcome to the first of our webinar series for June and July. Tonight's presentation is about the role that sports psychology can play in our long-term player development, and it will be presented by Patrick Jones. Patrick's from the Hospital Herbert Sound Club in County Limerick and is a school teacher in Our Lady Queen of Peace School here in Janesborough. Pat's also involved with the Underage Hurling Academy in Limerick and is working at the moment towards his accreditation in sports psychology. Pat is also a tutor, has also a coach education tutor, and tonight he will look at values of us as a coach. He looks at the values of creating an environment and sustaining motivation ourselves as players and as coaches. The presentation will last the bones of 45-50 minutes. If you wish to ask any questions, you can do so with the question icon above in the top right hand side of your screen with the question mark on it. You can just click on that. It'll open up a window on the side, and you can type in your question there, and we can try and get around to answer that at the end. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Pat to you and let him go through the presentation on the role sports psychology has in our long-term player development. Okay, so Pat, over to you.
Thanks a million, Noel. Thanks for everyone for logging on, and thanks to Noel for this great opportunity. As Noel said, I'm a primary teacher in Our Lady Queen of Peace in a second primary school in Janesborough in Limerick City. I'm the homeschool community liaison officer, which for those of you that don't know, it's a post you can take for 5 years where I work with families in the area and supporting them and the children. It's a special post in disadvantaged areas. So I began coaching when I was 19 with the club. The underage had gone down a bit at the time, and I thought, sure, look, I'll give a hand. I always liked the skill aspects of the game, so I love striking a ball, and I said, I'd be able to impart a bit of that on a few of the underage players to help them strike a ball a bit better, become more skillful. And at the time I was going through my teacher training, and it would have been an important line in the CV, but my coaching philosophy has come a long way since then. There's a long way to go yet. But as I was doing that, then coaching with the club, I got involved with the coaching courses Noel and the lads were providing. So I did the foundation. I did the level 1 about 6 times because it was a summer course for teachers as well in July, and the level 2. After that, then I did a master's in education. And in my second year of that, for my dissertation, I got the opportunity to work with great opportunity to work with Richard Bowles, who was my supervisor. Just a great lad. Great support, pointed me in a lot of great directions in coaching, and I'll talk a little bit about what I did for that research later on. At the same time, then I'd run out of coaching courses because it only went as far as level 2. So I plagued Noel, and eventually he said, look, there's a tutor course going ahead. There's a few GDAs from Munster doing it, jump on there. So luckily enough, I got into that, and it was absolutely excellent. Learned an awful lot about teaching even on it. It was very different to the coaching courses. I was put on the spot, presenting, and just you're looking at things from a different lens. After that, what did I do? I got involved with the Hurling Academy then. So the current minor team, I was one of the coaches at 14s, 15s and 16s, and I have a different role this year. I suppose inspired by 2018 there, where I saw the super performance Limerick had and the huge important role Caroline had with the team and getting the monkey off the back about 1973 and all this, and just the bulletproof nature in which Limerick took to the field, and the resilience they had below in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. And something I'd been thinking about myself for a long time was sports psychology. So I took 6 months off work last year, went back and studied a master's in UL, and then out of that I got the opportunity to work towards my accreditation with the Hurling Academy. So a slightly different role, and I'm very grateful to Pat Donnelly and Dar Droog and Paul Brown in particular, and all the coaches for just being very supportive and give me a bit of space this year to find my feet. But that's why Noel's asked me to speak here today. So knock it on a bit here. So tonight's webinar, I'll give a brief introduction of what my understanding of sports psychology is and where I see the role for it in the club in particular, from under 6 all the way up to senior level. And then we'll look at where the coach's role can come in creating this environment and developing the psychological well-being and fortitude of players. How you can support individual players, which is becoming increasingly highlighted in coaching, but to do all that and to create the right environment for players, you must start with yourself. So you have to look at what your own coaching purpose is. Why do you coach? And what are your values? Because what you bring to coaching, you're infectious, to borrow a term from the current climate. Your attitude and what you put forward is infectious to the players, and it's really important to consider your own purpose, your own values, to ensure they're in line and they sit right with you before you start creating the environment and designing your training around the players. And if we've time for Q&A at the end, hopefully we'll get some good questions. I did say I was going to talk about dealing with COVID-19, but a couple of factors that when I went to sit down to do this, there was just an awful lot in it. All of these are kind of a webinar in itself, or several. So I'm really only glossing over things. So please ask a few questions if you want me to elaborate on anything. Also, things are opening up with the COVID situation. So if we have questions about it at the end, I'll take them. Okay. So the first thing is sports psychology. So, like I said, that I suppose most people's understanding of it and my understanding of it before I undertook the masters was it's kind of what we see on the field there, the performance leading up to the game, what players do to prepare for the game. We've all seen I'm sure most of us have seen the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, and look, in a lot of ways we'd be saying don't be like Mike, but what really stood out for me was just his will to win, his ability to deliver on the day, these kind of clutch performances. And I think one of the most powerful quotes from it was towards the tail end of the series anyway, and the boys were shooting difficult throws from out the side of the court and having the crack and teasing each other and slagging each other, and he just steps up and nails it, and his response was, why would I worry about a shot I haven't taken yet? And like that's what I saw with sports psychology, just that ability to be present, to be in the moment, to have just utter belief and confidence in what you're doing. It's gas to even think of like the whole field of cognitive psychology and sports psychology, and you go back to the Greeks, some of the Greek philosophers, Stoic philosophers 2,000 years ago, and these boys knew the story. So like a lot of the quotes that we pull from Stoic philosophy is nearly the pillars of what cognitive psychology and sports psychology is about. So we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can choose how we respond to them. And Michael Jordan always seemed to respond effectively when things went against him in games. And this leads on. Another thing we've heard is control the controllables. So understanding what we can control, what we can control, and for the things we can control, what we can influence. And if we take that example of Limerick taking to the field in 2018, ever since really, that they weren't worried about the venue, the crowd, the referee, the weather, the pitch. They're worried about what to control. They're thinking about the tactics they discuss, the skills, their own abilities, their movement on and off the ball, and how they're going to behave in the warm up. And I suppose that's it on the surface, but when we dig into it, there's a lot more to just that performance. This is a Danish model for sports psychology delivery, and I've adapted it for our situation a bit here. Hopefully I can zoom in on this now. I can. Lovely stuff. So we have a pyramid here, a performance pyramid, and inside this pyramid is the resources the player has to be able to deliver a performance. So situations, things happen to him. Either things go right, things go wrong, and the resources he has or she has determined, how they're going to respond in performance. But there's so much more to this. So like we'll start up here at the top, which is what a sports psychologist would work with, which are these psychological skills. Now these are something we all do. We have competition strategies. We try and build our self-confidence. We try and concentrate in games, and we've all these strategies around this. We try and control our arousal before games. We don't try and get too amped up or nervous. We set goals for ourselves. We pay attention and try to block out distractions. We visualize, we imagine what the game's going to be like and what we want to do in the game, and we watch our self-talk. We try and talk ourselves up as best as we can. So we do all these things, but where a sports psychologist comes in is we practice them effectively, and we try to make sure that we're using them as helpful as we can. So like, for example, I was very good at visualizing and imaging growing up. Like I'd imagine myself scoring 3-7, but then I go to the game and realize someone was marking me, and realize it's a different ball game altogether. So it's only when I studied the masters I realized my visualization wasn't really effective and wasn't really helping me in my performance. So it's honing into those things and making them effective. But if you want your psychological skills to work, you're going to have there's life skills to be developed as well. So there's other aspects of things. So skills you've learned from your work or school environment can come in and help you in your sporting life, and likewise the opposite way around. So being able to plan, being committed, so you're not going to feel motivated the whole time, but you have to showing up to your training, showing up to your game is very important. And obviously equally showing up to work when you don't feel like it's very important in later life. Working well as a team, getting your sport life study balance right so you don't burn out and you maintain your well-being. And beneath that again, which kind of drives it all, is the person's personality and identity. So our sense of self-worth, their motivations, what they value, because what they value and what they see as important will drive how they behave and affect how they interact with all these skills and how they perform. And their personality types, they behave in certain different ways, and we have being able to, as a coach, being able to understand different personalities. Some people are very outgoing and will respond to that, and some people are quieter, and it's not personal if they don't, they're not jumping for joy every time they see you. So where we come into it, I suppose, as coaches, then is these are the player experiences a success or something goes against them. So like within the triangle, then the resources, do they get carried away if something goes well for them, or are they able to stay grounded? If something goes against them, can they bounce back and make the best out of it, or do they they wilt and give up, which is very pertinent for the team we have tonight. But what we need to tune into is the huge impact we have as coaches that we can have on the environment, like that we can instill values, we can instill self-worth, we can instill confidence in these players by the way we design our sport and environment. And these key people, coach, managers, teammates, even competitors, they influence how these players respond and perform. And even more important sometimes, and I know this from my work situation, is the non-sporting environment. When things are going well or aren't going well, and socially, with family, with partners, with friends, in your job, in school, there's a huge impact in your performance, and you really test your resources and how resilient you are to respond effectively to it. So when we look at coaching purpose and values, we look at that pyramid, and it's about, there's so much more than just to deliver as a coach, getting the team right to perform it. You're developing people. Now, if you're going to design the environment where you want people to try to instill confidence, to communicate values, good life skills, and as well as the psychological skills, you have to really know what you're about yourself. Why do you coach? I'm sure all of us here would say, to develop players in our club and to develop as a coach ourselves, it's your purpose. But your purpose is far greater than that as a coach. Where I'm teaching at the moment, the south side of Limerick City, a lot of GA clubs there find it really difficult to field underage teams. Some really underage is non-existent there. And maybe the children inside there don't notice the huge void, but I see the huge void comparing it to my own club and what the children there get out of it. The sense of community, the sense of loyalty to the place where you belong, building the connection with the friends around you, with the parents, knowing everyone in your local community, in a very positive way. Having these role models, the older players, bringing you on. Inside there, when that's missing inside, the soccer, which is a fabulous game, but you find that there isn't great loyalty there, even in the underage. If you don't play well, if the team isn't going well, you up sticks and leave to the next best one. And there's one club in the city there, and it's several underage in the south side, several underage teams, but the rest then are, Wayne the way of Crew Park, Jamesborough, virtually no underage at the moment. And, it's really missing a trick there with the kids there. The other aspect of it is, the social capital you contribute to, the social aspect and well-being and good you contribute to these players. Particularly, as I touched on there, when things aren't good at home, when things aren't good, in the environment, if things going against them, they're having a hard time. There is this phrase there, it only takes one good adult, for a child to be resilient and to latch on to that and to have a positive impact and really turn a child's or a young fella's life around. And one thing to note is, the Growing Up in Ireland survey, I always keep an eye on it. It's a longitudinal study which tracks the overall well-being of children in Ireland and how life is, basically, education, family circumstances, economic situations, social situations. And it's been improving steadily since the last recession of 2008. Things have improved, but be mindful now we're facing into another economic crisis, and it's economic strain and social strain and family strain is something everyone's probably going to experience in every village in Ireland now, and every local coach is going to have that at their doorstep. And just knowing the role, you being that one good adult, is hugely powerful, and it should really, for you to know that that's part of your purpose as well, is a powerful thing. So what's the GA's purpose? So Brian Cuthbert and Mick Dempsey were on talking about presenting the new player pathway. Now I know it's long-term player development I've spoken about. I'm not really going to go into the nitty-bitties of player pathways, but the objective of the player pathway is for players to play and stay. That's simple. Obviously some we want them to go on and they might be inter-county stars, but they're few and far between, especially at club level. But we want all our players to play and stay because, as I discussed, the GA club offers them so much. So what environment do we need to create around the players, and what really matters then in long-term development? So to look at two things. Firstly, we look at the very talented youngsters that we always see, the early stars. And statistics show that only about 10% of elite. Now I don't know how we can have it. This is an American coach, John O'Sullivan. I don't know, you can have an elite athlete at 10 years old, but they're only still elite at 18. So these very promising youngsters, just it's one, like 9 out of 10 of them fall away, which is mad. But understandable, when we think about it. The opposite of it then is, 92% or 90% of people, only 8% of Nobel Prize winners were child prodigies. So 90% of our elite come from late bloomers or late bolters or steady learners. Now, if you want a more concrete example or close to home example of that, this is a program from the Tony Forster tournament when I was involved there a few years ago with the 14s and the Sonny Walsh. And it's a player of the tournament that they publish in the program every year. So to put this in context, these are the players this is the best player in Ireland, their age, the best player in the country. So when the people are judging this award, it's very hard not to see this person go on and starring for their county. They're the best of what they do at their age. But when we look at it, a bit like that statistic from John O'Sullivan, only a handful, make it to inter-county level, so they fall away. So, there's a number of reasons for this, which we'll get into, but when a child starts off and they might be completely dominating, they might be slightly physically bigger, but not for all, that's not the case for all these players. So when they start off, they might be scoring 10 goals in the goal games blitz, and everyone's telling them how brilliant they are, and you gave that team an awful hiding and you scored so many goals. But You know, you don't score 10 goals in an under-21 game or a minor game. So, you know, it's kind of a false situation for them. And, you know, that's not what happens over the long term. So, you know, they're attaching all their self-worth and their identity to being this superstar hurler when, you know, it's not really the case. Like, people are going to grow, they're going to catch up a bit. It doesn't mean that they're getting worse. But, you know, it can cause them to lose confidence and fall away. So, again, you know, communicating the right messages to our stars. So, because it is very disappointing when it's such a talented youngster falls away like that. And equally to all the players, giving them the right message so they play and stay is very important. So, you know, a good exercise in the time we're in now is to look at your once you understand your purpose, to look at what you value. So what do you value in players? One of the common player outcomes we have are the 4 C's. So you want your players to be competent, confident, be connected with each other, and have character. So just developing good people as well as good players, like those life skills we talked about. And, you know, once you, like, I suppose, you know, if you're sitting down with your core values and it's, you know, big shoulders and pulling hard, you might want to go back to your purpose and think again. But once you know what your values are, you know, anything up to 10, look, it's completely up to yourself. You know your context, you know what you want to achieve with the kids, what you want to impart. But it's important to define it. So what does, like, the GA is mad about acronyms and 4 C's and 7 P's and 12 D's, but you know, define it yourself. What does it mean to you? What does competence mean to you? What does confidence mean to you in what you're trying to instill in youngsters? Now, this activity can be done very effectively with players themselves, if you're comfortable with it. Something sports psychologists and coaches do, and have the players come up with the values, and it can be very effective to hark back to the whole time. You know, you're constantly quoting them back to them as the year progresses. But, you know, definitely have an understanding of it yourself, know where you're coming from first as well anyway, even if you do want to do it with the players after. So that's fine, understanding your values, knowing your purpose, but how do you know, does it stay there in your head, or how do you transmit it onto the field and bring it into the environment? So once you know your values, for each one, write down the behaviors that would exhibit these values on the field. So what should the players be doing that would show that they know that they're transmitting this value? So just one example here. So I want my players to be committed. So very good life skill as well. So I want them to show up physically, I want them to show up mentally, and I want them to show up socially. So that's the commitment I want: physical, social, and mental. And then what that's going to look like. They're going to make every effort to attend every training. They're going to give their best effort while they're there, and they're going to be ready to work and encourage their teammates. You know, a connection, then you do the same. It doesn't have to be 3, but again, you know your own context. Very good book to that kind of brings you through all this in a kind of a lesson plan format is, and actually I'm only going to suggest one book in the whole webinar, and that's this, Coaching Better Every Season. If you didn't read any other book and you read this cover to cover and pulled out of what was relevant for your context and your club and your culture, you'd be an excellent coach. You don't really need much more. He's pulled the main bits together very well with Gilbert. So Coaching Better Every Season, and the Togetherness book is a short book on lesson plan if you're interested in building strong connection and togetherness in a team. And you know, Simon Sinek's the why, you know, purpose, you know, communicating your purpose and communicating your values. You know, we'll talk a bit about that as well. So, but I would say definitely Coaching Better Every Season. So now, how do we create the environment around the players? What do we have to consider? Okay. So I've picked out three main components that I've discussed. There's obviously more. Look, these are the 3 that I find the most important. So we've had our purpose, but look, what do the child see as the purpose of sport? Why do they play a sport? So I was scrambling for studies, and this is an international one, but I came across a lovely one on Twitter there a while ago, but I don't know if someone might send it on to me on the GA. There was a motivation survey on why children play sport. I couldn't get my hands in it, but I have this one anyway. You'll find they're fairly universal. So the top 3 why children play: to be part of a team, to play, and to compete. Okay, fairly simple. So we have to create an environment to cater for that. And the converse of that, why do people drop out? So this is a Camogie survey from Fitzpatrick and Lane. You know, just phoning in a few there. They don't feel competent. They don't feel they're good at it. They're very little interest or motivation. And, you know, I suppose a lot of that was due, 60% is an awful lot to be seen as poor coaching and management. So, you know, our environment design is very important for getting the right environment so they sustain motivation. So what? Number one, the big one, games-based. You know, the environment should be games-based. And what, you know, Paul Brown gave an excellent presentation on games-based coaching and constraints learning. I think Noel told me beforehand he's throwing these up on YouTube, so definitely have a look at that. I'm not going to go into it only for the fact of what it contributes to players' motivations. Right, why games-based? So decision making, like, I think it's the most important skill that you could put across any sport. You know, so it's not specific, but this sport specific. So decision making and the ability to see patterns in play and react first, or as we say, reading the game, is the skill that separates elite performers at the highest level. So, like, you know, when they look at elite performers who are similar physically, have the same similarities technically, the only difference is their decision making on the field. And, you know, likewise, I suppose, a more close to home example, it's also the reason why Johnny, who couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo, is starting a corner back. So we see these, you know, I've been robbed a few times of starting places from lads who are far inferior to me technically, but, you know, they were more effective on the field. And, you know, that was my own lack of self-awareness that, you know, I was missing this decision making and this ability to be in the right place at the right time. These boys were just better at it. So, you know, maybe from playing another sport, hadn't much experience at hurling, but by God, they were effective. So, you know, but this is a really important skill to develop, and you're only going to develop it in a game. You're only going to recognize patterns if you're playing games. So are we giving players what they want and what they need? So Sergio Lara, who's head of this I Coach Kids research group, he puts it very nicely. He said, you know, we need to give children what they want and what they need, but if we can disguise the needs as wants, it's even better. So, like, the game is great for doing that. I have a question below here. I don't want anyone to take offense to it, but I'll explain myself in a minute. But it's a question I always ask myself when I'm planning a coaching session. You know, am I adding more? Is what the drills and activities and I'm designing, am I adding more value than if I just showed up, warmed the players up, blew the whistle, threw in the ball and left? Now, you know, you might raise your eyebrows at that statement, but when we think about it, it takes an excellent coach to be actually better than that. Take your average club team across the country, you know, if they decided they're going to play 40, you know, if they have 40 training sessions in the year, they're going to play a 60-minute game for each of them. You know, they're going to improve. You know, does a coach even need to be there? Like, would they take ownership of it themselves? They'd probably warm themselves up. They're big boys. They probably have most of their technical skills developed. You know, they start taking ownership of tactics themselves as well. So, you know, as a coach, you know, you need to be excellent if you're going to top that. So part of that is, moving on here. You know, coaches need to stop seeing themselves as this transmitter of information. You know, telling, you know, I'm going to tell you what to do now and how to do it. And, you know, you're the architect of this optimal learning environment, because, you know, if you just let them at it, they'd be in a learning environment anyway, playing the game. So you might argue then, you might say, you know, well, sure, look, if a player plays a game for 60 minutes, he might only touch the ball for 7 seconds, which has been shown. So that's where our step model come in, you know, putting constraints on the environment, adapting the environment so you afford the players opportunity to develop different skills. So, you know, the GA used the step model. Yes, change the task, change the equipment, change the participants. You know, I'm not going to get into it too much, Paul. You know, Paul spoke about it very well. Right, the second one has to be mastery orientated. So you've got two different approaches. You can be about mastery, which is about self-improvement and constantly learning, or you can be about outcome, which is about winning and extrinsic rewards. So I don't know. I've gone into the dressing room at the start of the year plenty of times, and we've been listening to how we have to win the first round of the championship, and that'll set us up. And because we hate that show down the road, and that's why we're doing it, lads. You know, just if we do that, You know, plan A, win the first round of championship. Plan B, silence, and plan C, win the county final. So there's very little behind extrinsic outcome orientated environments, or when you're talking about and putting the emphasis on winning, there's very little thought behind it. There's nothing else. You know, you're concerned about others. You choose an easy option. You give up easily. And a bit like, you know, that those talented players earlier, they were pushing that outcome orientation onto them, I suppose, indirectly. You know, people telling them how great they were at winning and, you know, beating the lard out of everyone they played against. Well, what we want to move is just intrinsic. So playing hurling for the sake of hurling, playing football for the sake of football, or working on a skill for the sake of it. So, you know, you're more likely to persist, more likely to cope with setbacks, and you're more likely to have a positive attitude. So an example of this in practice would be in your game awarding a point for any attempt at a strike pass. So it doesn't matter if you succeed or not, just, you know, you're getting an extra point if you do a extra strike pass or an extra kick pass in football. And so look, it's self-governing. Like, the player isn't going to try and miss on purpose, you know. He's going to attempt to strike it. So really punishing it or putting in an extra consequence in that way isn't going to make any difference to how they perform it. And the third one of your environment is it has to be safe to fail. So this idea of psychological safety, which Mustafa Sarkar and Fletcher, two researchers in England, who are kind of the world leaders on resilience. So they look at companies and teams, really good teams who sustained success over years and years, and they honed into what it was about the environment, what they were doing. And the biggest thing they took out of it was this concept of psychological safety. And the people are not afraid to make mistakes. There's trust, and there's acceptance, there's learning, there's mastery inside in this environment. So the opposite then is, you know, when you're afraid of making a mistake, you're blaming others, you're deflecting off yourself, and you're less likely to share your ideas because, Jesus, if someone gets that now, they'll know that and what they know, and they'll be better than me altogether. There's this common knowledge effect, you know, sure, everyone knows that, or what are you at? The opposite side then, what we want is, you know, you want comfort admitting mistakes. You want learning from failure. You want everyone open and sharing their ideas, and, you know, this leads to better innovation. Like, I think, you know, there's this at its finest in companies is where, you know, big multinationals like Dell and Google, they have mistake forums every month where they share what went wrong for the month and what they learned from it, and they share that with everyone else. And it's a real sign of vulnerability, but, you know, it's accepted, and everyone, you know, people learn from their mistakes, and they don't make as much of them. Whereas when everyone's keeping the information to themselves, it's very isolated and a real toxic environment. So the thing about this is it's not all arm around the shoulder. You know, when you have that trusting environment, it's easier to challenge people, you know, and you know, if they're not maintaining the values and the standards you set out as a team, it's easy to talk to them, you know, to pull them on that in the right way. You know, it's a facilitative environment. So like it's high challenge. You know, it's not comfortable or boring. You know, you have to challenge the players. They have to be pushed outside their comfort zone, but that safety has to be there. You know, that trust, that clear communication, that clear expectation of what the behaviours are to be, what the goals are, what we value as a team, all has to be there. And when that is there, you have the foundations to really to push on the players, put them in a challenging environment, and to really learn. So, you know, the key to this is the way we frame mistakes in this safe to fail environment. You know, it doesn't have to be about look, good coaching, you'll preempt what mistakes are going to, you know, what the players are going to find difficult and what mistakes are going to be made in the session. But you don't have to spend, you know, 10 minutes at the start giving a bulletproof explanation and demonstration and scenarios of the game so that, you know, it runs perfectly. There's far more value in just giving just what they need to get it going, letting them off, letting it break down, give the opportunities for a player to explore it themselves, opportunity for the coach to check for understanding. Well, you know, actually I thought everyone on the team knew that, but, you know, this is after breaking down now, so clearly you don't. And an opportunity to demonstrate new competences, improvement and learning from the start to the finish. So, you know, it started fairly rough and raw. I pulled all the players in. We asked what was going wrong. They came up with the solutions themselves. And after 5-10 minutes, they're humming. And we've all made an improvement. We've set the challenge a little bit beyond where we were, and we've closed that gap now. And a great sense of achievement from everyone. And look, this kind of approach prepares players for difficult scenarios in games. So you're going to be on the sideline. You're not going to be able to. It's limited what you're going to be able to influence on game day. If they haven't done in training, it's not going to happen in the match. So you create difficult situations and have them explore the solutions. Wade Gilbert, who wrote that book, always talks about this American volleyball coach. I don't know his name, but these female volleyball team were number one or are number one in the world. And people would come to watch them and they'd leave going, what in the name of God was that about their cat? They're all over the shop. But, the coach has this concept of messy practice. So, in some part of every session, it can't be the whole session or you'd lose motivation. They work on the things they're not good at. And things break down and things go wrong. And, and they embrace that. He even goes to the point of punishing if they don't make mistakes because they're not pushing hard enough. So, he calls this messy practice. So we might look out at drills and training and be conscious of this in the academy, when it started under 14. Everything has to look right with the lads. They have to be humming, the cones have to be set out right, and the ball has to be zipping around the place. When in fact, it's the opposite. Things have to break down and the players have to work through it. So, when you look out, at a good training session, and you see things going wrong and the coach pulling his hair out and the players all over the place, there's probably far more learning in that than, that's zipping around the place with balls being pinged perfectly to hand because they're within their comfort zone and there's no learning going on. So you couldn't do a webinar without a John Wooden quote. So teaching is not eliminating the gap, but understanding it. So we're not expecting, it's unrealistic to be expecting perfection for them to get everything right. Perfection is going out and expecting to beat a team 448 to no score. And, it just doesn't happen in practice. So, you're not going to get everything perfect, and understand, embrace the mistakes, try and understand where that is, and communicate that to the players. That's what we're about, working on our mistakes. So just to sum it up, games-based, mastery, and safe to fail are the three main components I'd see for the optimal environment. Just a little bit about the research I did in the first masters I did there with Richard Bowles. So we looked at kind of setting up a community of practice, working in a local GA club where we all the coaches would learn from each other. I'd act as a mentor, and we worked around the kind of teaching skills of coaching, the 6 how to coach skills or pedagogical skills. So building rapport, being good at observing the players, making decisions and analysing, providing good demonstrations, explaining and providing feedback. Yeah, that was interesting, but what we found was the biggest challenge they faced wasn't with any of these. It was with coping with individual difference. So, catering for the individual, the different abilities, your superstars there, your lad who can't swing, swing the hurley, hit the ball off the ground, and the fella putting it over off his left from the 65, the different personalities, the different behaviours. So supporting individual players is really the hardest part of teaching, the hardest part of coaching, but the key to it all, really. So if we look at, why do some players perform better than others, show consistent desire to improve in their sport and persist while others fail, it comes down to, motivation at an individual level, why people stay at a task or stay at their chosen game or activity. We all have three, and this is ourselves included, and from right down to, a 6-year-old child, with 3 basic psychological needs. Yeah, DC and Ryan would argue with self-determination theory. Autonomy, we need to feel a sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So we go through what each of these are quickly. So, autonomy is the sense of control you have over your own learning, your own behaviour. So, being allowed to do it for, to play the game for the sake of playing it. Are you given choice? These are the ways to promote a choice. Don't put too much pressure on the player. Promote decision making. Be independent. I think, one of the nicest things I ever heard about coaching was Ollie Coffey, one of the local GDAs in Limerick. You probably all know him. And he said, one of his favourite parts of coaching was, particularly at, you know, under 6 and under 8, was to give every child a ball at the start of the session and just let them play around with it and express themselves for 10 minutes. And, you know, he could go around then and interact with them, build rapport with a few of them, get to know them, give them a few hints. But, you know, the children, you know, they just thrive on it. And it's really important for them to settle into the session. And, you know, we still do that at adult level. You know, the adults go out, you know, if they're on time for the sessions, they go out, they poke around and work on what they want to work on themselves. And, you know, this is really important. So this next point, always provide a rationale of why, you know, or even better, ask why. You know, why are we doing that, lads? Do you know why we're doing this drill? You know, it's really important that that's communicated to the players the whole time, because it builds autonomy, but it builds understanding, and it communicates the values we want to instill as well, and allow them to come up with the solution. So a lot of the stuff we were talking about there. Competence then, you know, how well the players perceive themselves to be able to succeed or have a chance of succeeding. So am I good at this, or will I be good at this if I practice? You know, a little more practice and I'll be there. So this is where setting the challenge level appropriately comes in. So just beyond where they are at the moment, not too far ahead, or they lose motivation. They need feedback. You provide constructive feedback. You know, believe in your players' abilities. You know, it's easy to look out and go, that lad is useless. You know, and you know, you have to see where that young fella can improve, or young lady can improve, because, you know, it oozes off you. The players read that straight away. Acknowledge improvements in those circumstances in particular, and give confidence to overcome challenges. Okay, and the last thing then is relatedness. So you know, your sense of belonging and connection to the team and to a group, you know, being part of something good. We all want that, don't we? We want our team to be the best team, and we just want to be part of something good. It's not all about winning, but we want things done well and working well, and part of something, having that social connection. So we can develop this as a coach. You know, we're developing relatedness when we acknowledge players' feelings. So, you know, not jumping down a fella's throat for losing his rag at the referee. You know, he needs to work on his self-regulation. And, you know, I understand you lost it. You know, you were angry in that situation. You felt it was the wrong decision. But, you know, what's the most helpful way? And is that sticking to our behaviours and values? Enjoy spending time with the players. Show them you're having fun. Show them you enjoy what you're doing. And show players you're listening. I suppose there are no wrong answers is tested a lot, but, you know, you have to show that you know, everyone's opinion is valid. When your players like you, you know you're going well. Standard enough. And when you empathize, I'll talk a little bit about that in the last slide. So practical approaches. Hopefully we'll be allowed to do the first one in soon enough. Get players to high five before and after games, just to connect. Physical connection is very important, and we're certainly missing that at the moment. Pick 3 players to connect with each training. So 3 different lads you're just going to make an effort to talk to, ask them how they're getting on, and communicate your core values and standards in the way we were talking there. And look, when we come back to this survey, which is interestingly, like, you know, I was scrambling for you know, a player survey on player motivations and why they play sport, and the study was actually from Romania. But it's just gassed how I said I'd leave it in because it's gassed how across cultures it's all the same. You know, our motivations are the same. So to be part of a team, there's your relatedness. To play, that's your sense of you know, autonomy, just to play for the sake of playing, and to compete, you know, that's competence, you know. So like, you know, there's your evidence for self-determination theory straight away. That's why a child wants to play sport. So if you cater for those children's needs, you're going to have the player play and stay with you in the club, and they're going to develop and they're going to improve. Just a little bit left of field here. When we're talking about standards, not completely left of field, I suppose, but we're talking about standards of behaviour, and just to dip into the sports psychology small, but one thing I'd look at is the kind of self-talk and the way a player appraises themselves. So one of the things we talked about in relatedness there was empathy. So it's very important to know the difference between empathy and sympathy. So I was brilliant for all these statements, kind of justifying why I didn't play well. and looking for a bit of sympathy and deflecting from what was actually really going on, in my performance. And you get a very important talk here from Pat Keane and Sean O'Donnell on the importance of stats and telling players what's what and not getting too emotional about it. Just this is the way it is and drive on. So players, these kind of sympathy, self-defeating statements, this all or nothing thinking and perfectionism. I have to do this. I have to score every free. You need, as a coach, if you can challenge some of these behaviors, you're actually serving a great role as a sports psychologist as well as a coach. To not accept these statements from the players. I had to score every free. Well, look, you're not going to score every free. It's just the reality of it. So drive on. You focus on the free you're taking, and you learn from it and you move on. Overgeneralizing. So one thing went wrong, I had a bad game. Disqualifying the positive. I missed that sitter in front of goal for the last game. Nothing went right. Nothing went right for me. It wasn't my day. Personalization or excessive responsibility. Oh, it's my fault we lost. When clearly there's 14 other lads in the team, cop on to yourself. Should statements, I should have scored that. You should have done nothing because it's done, right? So, like, I know we talked a lot about developing the person, but I might have been the wording I used there at times mightn't have been great, but it's okay to be firm when they're not being helpful for themselves, when they're these statements, if they carry this into other aspects of their lives, are very bad for their well-being. So it's okay to be firm as a coach in the behaviours and standards you set. So when we talk about building confidence, you have an expectation for them to be confident and for them to back themselves. And so these statements shouldn't really be accepted in the environment. So you want to empathise with the players, understand where they're coming from, but don't be being to sympathy. So to sum up, just everything we've spoken about tonight. Where we want up here is cater for what the children need to stay playing, to stay involved, to stay motivated, to stay improving. Is self-determination. They need the sense of independence and autonomy in their tasks and what they're doing. They need to feel they're good at it. So you need to set the challenges right. They need to have connection with the team. They need this sense of belonging. Right, to do that though, the environment has to be right. So, games-based mastery and safe to fail, it's very conducive for promoting that in the individual. And, if you're going to design the environment, you have to have your, set your stall out right as well, know what you're about. So you have to really closely examine your purpose, your values and your standards. And that's about all I have for you folks for tonight. So hopefully there'll be one or two questions. I've flown through it there. I'd love to have done a webinar on each of those, but no one will listen to me talking for that long. But look, I'll stop sharing my screen now, and no one might jump in there and save me with a few questions.
Thanks for that there, Pat. Very useful insights there in chat. We've one or two questions coming in there, all right, that you might consider there just for the next couple of minutes if we have a bit of time.
Yeah.
So one question that came in there was you mentioned about the safe to fail aspects there a while back and what you wanted to slide. So the question here about that is like how would you go about introducing that to a club team that has maybe had a good few losses in the past and now is in the middle of developing a blame culture? So how could you develop this safe to fail within that setup?
So I suppose it comes back to your, what messages are you delivering consistently throughout the year? It's very difficult to turn around. If your whole focus was on winning, and then turn around in the middle of the season after a couple of losses and, change your tact. So you really have to get your stall right from the start. And when it is about mastery and your own performance, well then, that's what you're about. But if you were talking about winning from the start, then you're in a bit of a predicament. You heard, Limerick, when they were interviewed, they always talked about their process. So, that word process is breaking down their performance into smaller parts and playing the way they want to play and, you've no control over how good the opposition are going to be at the end of the day. You've no control over what they do. If they train 6 nights a week or have the best trainer in the world with them and everyone's hugely committed, you've control over yourself. So you can only deliver your best performance, and that's what it needs to be about. And you'd have heard, any interviews with the Limerick management or players, and they always talk about their process. So they're completely consumed about themselves, and they're minding their own house. They're controlling what they can control. And that's what it needs to be about. And when players understand that, it's a lot easier to take losses and drive on. But if you set your stall out about winning and you lose, that's the downfall of it. And that can go into a big spiral. So also a common thing that happens is, we had a problem there. A few of the players in my club said, we win again, we play great, and then we fall away from the next game. And again, that's coming down to the outcome. Too much focus on the outcome. Oh, we were great there, we won. But it has to be about your own performance, what you're doing in training, what messages you're consistently delivering to the players. Hope that answers it.
Okay, thanks for that one, Pat. Another one there is around the potentially skillful players. The question here is about what strategies can you employ towards a very skillful player, but there's fails due to a lack of self-awareness in a team environment. If you can give them some information on that.
It can be difficult, things that there can be a lot of stuff. Say you might be doing the best in the world to be, mastery. You're taking a mastery approach with the young fella and trying to push him on himself and challenge him, but then it could be very outcome orientated at home. It could be all about winning, and it could be telling Johnny you'll play for Limerick. You're 8 years of age. It's definitely going to happen. You're a superstar. You're way better. You're better than everyone else in the team. So when that's where the home environment comes in, and I think it's the most influential one. So it's really your craft as a coach there to try and keep him grounded, to connect with that young fella, and just to try and communicate that value that it's about improvement. It's it depends on what age he is, but showing him that program. If he's a 14-year-old, you could show him that Tony Forstall program, and that paints a picture. But it's trying to treat everyone with the same, that everyone has the same values. That's where that might come in. Having really strong values, really strong understanding for all the players, what's expected of them, of their behaviour. One of your values might be humility. How you respond to winning, how you treat your opponents after a game, how you treat your teammates when they make mistakes. So that humility aspect could be one of your core values that you try to get across to players. But look, there's no right answer with coaching. Like I said, it's the hardest part is catering for each individual situation, and some individuals it's very difficult to get through to them. So, but that's the craft of coaching and teaching, and yeah.
Okay, and I suppose kind of maybe on a similar level there, but like if you a question here about players that are you mentioned the different levels. The player that's maybe struggling to hit the ball, but the player that's working away on his weak side and putting us over the bar. So an approach to players, do you work with your stronger players together and weaker players together, or what would your approach be around that?
I like it's a mix is probably the best. Like, I suppose when you're talking about that situation, you're looking at having a number of different coaches. You're not going to be on your if you're on your own these days with an under 6 or an under 8 age group. Just you should be kicking up a bit, because it's very, very hard to manage. It's virtually impossible to manage all those different abilities. A nice aspect when we're talking about games based is not be too worried about them. Having everyone on the same level. Choosing your battles with it. A nice idea for, like, when I was coaching under 8s, there was one or two kids who were a small bit stroppy, so I didn't give frees in games because they'd be looking for them too much. But instead of, if they made a mistake or it wasn't a free. It was they had to take themselves out of the game for a couple of seconds or perform three repetitions of a skill. Likewise, if you have the children in a game, well, that's the time to go in and attend. Without they don't mind it to that age. Look, 6, 8, they're probably not even might be even looking around them. So that a coach at that age, you're not the referee. You're going in, you're attending, you're talking about changing grips, you're encouraging, you're working on it that way as well. So it's just being patient, taking your time, challenging the good players in the its best way you can, putting constraints on that good player so he's not dominating the game, giving him his few minutes to dominate it, or he gets he loses all motivation. But keeping him humble as well. He has to do his time in goals. I like at that age, most clubs don't. You mightn't have huge numbers to be breaking them up into different groups, and they definitely should, be mixed for a lot of it, where they get to know all their teammates and they learn that sense of humility and patience as well. It's a very important skill for them to develop.
Very good, very good. And on that thing about you mentioned about even numbers may not be great. Just all your ideas there that you meant, like there's some very, very good ideas in that. Trying to sell that across to people in the club, like that trying to make sure that the dropout rate doesn't happen. That you're trying to maintain the numbers that you have. That if you have decent numbers now, how do you sell the idea of making sure you need to do A, B, and C to keep those players with your club?
Okay, so you're saying if you've two coaches working with you that might have a different, have I got you right there? Might have a different kind of value system than you have.
So to sell what you're saying to club. A club maybe went down a different avenue and you want to change around. So what could you do to introduce some of those new ideas to the club?
Well, I suppose if it's a case where there's two coaches or two parents helping out working with you, I presume if you've taught to the level, if you're on this webinar, you're probably taking interest in coaching and you're a good coach, you'd probably be the main coach of that age group. So you're the kind of model there of behavior. So like if you understand what your values are and what you want to get across, and you're organized and you're prepared, you're the model there, and they'll see it working well. The parents with you will see it working well, and as well as the players buying in, the two lads on the sideline will buy in as well that are helping you out. So you just have to be strong there and assertive in your position there. It doesn't have to be any conflict, but being firm in what you value, and you can always you can back it up. There's evidence there of what works. There's policy from the GAA, and there's the way you do things is just work. It will work better than them shouting and roaring about winning or pulling hard or big shoulders. It's a different conversation in the GA club, but it's just about having open and honest conversations with them and presenting cold hard facts to them that this is how it works. This is why this team are working well. This is why they're successful. It can be a difficult one, but in fairness, I said most clubs now they're very progressive. We've come an awful long way, and people are very open to change, and it's well publicised as we're getting bombarded in the media of the best approaches and social media, so that really helps. It's one of the positives of social media. We're getting best practice thrown at us the whole time. So that's hard to ignore.
Yes, and I suppose it's a case too, Pat, of maybe little steps all the time rather than making huge, massive changes all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that'll take time, to change the mindset there of two coaches working with you or a mindset within the club. But if you're doing good work, people will buy in.
Yes, very good. We're almost done, folks. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Pat for the last fought and putting a bit of work, a huge amount of work he put into us in doing his research and getting his slides there together, and also his patience earlier on today when we were trying to get this up and running. We had a few little glitches there about 4 o'clock this evening, but everything went off okay. So thanks very much for that, Pat. Really do appreciate your time. And like wish you all the best with your further studies, and you're looking forward to your return to school there in August.
Absolutely.
To all of you that signed in and took part in the webinar this evening, I want to thank you very much for your attention over the last hour or so. There's some really good information there that we got from Pat. Like, this will be available, as I said, hopefully up on our YouTube channel that we'll have set up towards the weekend. Just a reminder that we'll be continuing the series next Wednesday evening, and we'll have Pat Keane from Newcastle West and Sean O'Donnell from Gary Spillane. They'll be on, and they'll be looking at the developing stats and how stats can be used in a club setting. So the registration, some good lot of you have registered for that, but if more people want to register, they can do so through the form that has been sent out previously, and the link will be sent out again at lunchtime next Wednesday. So for this evening, I want to thank you all for your time. I hope you got something from that. And again, once more, I want to thank Pat for his time over the last 4 to 10 days. So thank you, good night, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.